It is the 15th of April 2022, and it is the 30th day into the so-called fasting month, known as Ramadan or Ramadan. Millions, if not billions, of so-called Muslims around the world are currently fasting for a whole month and not eating from the time the sun rises until the sun sets, all because they say God told them to. I will be going over some sections of the so-called Qu'ran in Arabic to prove that Siyam does not mean fasting at all. However, even if I chose not to go into the Quran to disprove that Siyam means fasting, logic itself tells you that why would God make any of his followers suffer for a whole month? It also has zero benefit whatsoever to one's health. In fact, it probably is detrimental to one's health. Fasting, however, for once or twice a week is actually beneficial for the body, only because the food that we eat today is so toxic that the body needs a rest to rebuild itself. And that's the only benefit for fasting, regardless of what the doctors try and feed into you. So, moving on to authoritative document number 19, inspiration number 26, or mistakenly interpreted as chapter 19, verse 26. What precludes this section is Mary in English, or Maryam in Arabic, having contractions and giving birth to her son Jesus in English, or Isa in Arabic. If we take the standard translation, it concludes that God is asking Mary to fast just when she has given birth to a child. This section states Fakuli wa ashrubi, which is interpreted by translators in its exoteric language to mean so eat and drink, but the esoteric meaning is seek knowledge, fakuli, and tashrubi is satisfy your thirst for knowledge. It continues, and put glad tidings on your eye. Now no one would take that as its exoteric language, and thus its esoteric meaning is gladdened. It continues, and whoever should ask you from anyone, reply to them, I have vowed to my Creator a fast, as is currently translated, and thus therefore I shall not speak to anyone today. The question is, what has fasting got to do with not speaking to anyone today? This, the current translators of the so-called Quran cannot explain. So what do they turn to? They turn to elaborate stories in the hadiths, saying that the hadith can explain this for you, when there's nothing to explain if we take the meaning for what it means. I am of the opinion that Saul means to take up a task. Mary's task in this particular context was to not speak to anyone on that day. Authoritative document number 2, 183 to part of 185 will clarify this further. It is a particularly difficult section to wrap our mind around, and that is only because several words have been misunderstood and misinterpreted. 2, 183. Those of you who have sought the truth, it is your destiny to al-siyam, like it was those before you. Al-siyam meaning the task. So it is your fate to take upon the task like those that did before you, so that you shall be prepared. 184. Days numbered. In other words, the task was to be set out for a number of days of their choosing, depending on the particular task they were undergoing. To continue. And whoever amongst you are marida or ala safar. Now marida is interpreted in its exoteric language by the translators to mean ill, or ala safar, and safar to mean on a journey. That is totally out of context with the Quran, which speaks in esoteric language. Maridan in this instance is not ill, one who is not mentally capable of taking upon the task at that particular time, or ala safar, or he or she is already on a prescribed journey. To continue, they can do it a number of other days. And for those who can, in other words, do the task, it is upon you ta'am miskin, interpreted as feeding the needed, or feeding the helpless. Again, ta'am is translated in its exoteric language by the translators to mean literally feed. But ta'am in its esoteric language means to provide knowledge to the needy. So thus, they have the power, self-discipline and wisdom to help themselves. And whoever is obedient in doing the task, it is good for him. And if you all do the task together, it is better for all of you. Here it's making a slight referral to unity amongst those who have sought the truth. 185 briefly starts with the word Shahr, Ramadan. Shahr is again misinterpreted to mean month. Shahr just means a particular moment in time. And Ramadan again is misinterpreted to mean the holy month of this so-called fast. Rather, Ramadan means a tense situation. So tense, I would say it's a life and death situation. And it was during this particular life and death situation that this so-called Qu'ran was bestowed upon the masses as a guidance and a favour to them by those who wrote it. Bringing all this together, we can see that the advice given is that during times of severe persecution or a time of severe test, those who have sought the truth need to unite and conduct a specific task for a number of days to protect themselves and to be prepared. And what could that task be? It depends on the current situation. It could be to organize themselves, to train themselves militarily, to train themselves in PSYOP, and so on. Turning briefly to authority document number 4, inspiration number 2, or rather misinterpreted as chapter 4, verse number 92. It concludes that someone had killed someone by mistake, and if they cannot provide certain compensation, then they had to fast for 2 months. Does anybody find a problem with that? So somebody can kill somebody innocently or not, and just fast for 2 months, and all is forgiven and forgotten. This is the difficulty when the word siyam is translated as fasting. Rather than the person had to fast for 2 months, or sawm for 2 months, the person would have had to undergo a task for 2 months. And what would that task be? To re-educate the individual upon his duty and obligations in accordance with the laws of nature. But coming back to the earlier part of this, of 492, where it states qatul, again this is wrongly interpreted by the translators into its exoteric language to mean kill. But in the Quran, qatul in its esoteric language means to kill somebody, not physically. It is, for example, character assassination, rejection, isolation, and so forth. And what this section of the Quran 492 is describing, a scene where an individual, or it could have been an organization, did not provide another person or organization with the ability to express him or herself or theirselves freely. Instead, that person persecuted that person, character assassinated that person, gave that person bad publicity, called him a conspiracist, and so forth. And so no one would think it is sensible to listen to an alternative view. And what this particular section is saying is that those that do that need to go on to a task. And that task is they need to go on a sawm for 2 months. And what that is, in this instance, it will be self-restraint and to abide by the laws of nature, or our creator's laws of nature, which is that every man has the ability to express himself, and women as well, of course. And while we're on the subject of man and woman, briefly in authority document number 33, inspiration number 35, or chapter 33, verse 35. And what that section concludes is that basically every man and every woman is equal. However, that's not to say that every man and every woman are the same. I'll see you at my next video.